because of the whole, that she was a super hippie, and she ended up traveling around Asia. She traveled around Africa, around Europe. She even went to Israel a few times, but she ended up in Denmark. And there she met my father. And yeah, if you could go on mute, please, that would be great if you're joining. And so I was born and raised in Copenhagen, so an American mother and a Danish father. But they're always been very, I would say, progressive, kind of hippie-ish. My mother writes self-help books and so on. But you also might be wondering, like, what is my connection to what you're all doing at Icon and so on? What's interesting is just, I'm not kidding you, 2 days ago, I finally did my DNA test and I got my DNA results back. And what was interesting is, here are my DNA results. As you can see, I'm 100% more or less European, which is interesting, but I'm also part of the tribe. You know, my mother is Jewish and my father is not. And I think that makes me in the Jewish camp. And you can see here, my DNA results, they show it 51%, Jewish. So, and which is interesting. I've never actually been to Israel. I hope to one day go. It's surprising that, I've always had jobs where I travel off for work. I've never actually been to Israel, and I'd love to go. So I think now with the Corona crisis, I think it's just becoming a matter of not waiting until it happens. You've got to make a conscious choice to do it. I think we're all reevaluating our priorities, and I've always wanted to see Israel. So you can expect me to come there, one of these days when the world opens up again, but I'm excited to come see it. But so that's a little bit about my background, but I've always been a kind of a technology nerd. So when I was 21 in 2000, on February 1st, 2000, I made the move to California. I always wanted to be in Silicon Valley. It was always my dream to be part of the revolution of companies and individuals that were coming together to really further the ideal of how technology can help progress society in really interesting ways. I'm an idealist at heart, and I always felt that in California is where you saw the most innovation. I think now, 20 years later in 2020, I think that's very different. I think you're seeing a lot of great innovation in Europe, in Israel, even in Asia and so on. But back then, Silicon Valley was really the place to go. So February 1st, I made the move. Didn't have a job, didn't have a place to stay. I bought a one-way ticket from Copenhagen to California because I always wanted my life to be about the passion that I could pour into something. And I didn't want to look back on my life when I was 50 or 60 or 70 years old and say to myself, I was too scared to actually make the move. And so I made the move in 2000, and a month after I got there, in March of 2000, if you remember, the whole market crashed, and luckily in that month in February, when I first came, I got a job. I applied for a shitload of jobs through a website called Craigslist, and everybody back then was hiring. It was like the height of the .com bubble. Everybody was hiring, and I had some skills because I knew how to program websites. That was my skill. I was a web programmer, and I got hired. But a month after I got there, the whole market crashed. And it got worse and worse and worse. And it was just scary times. The company I was at didn't make it. I got laid off, ended up going to a different company that didn't make it. And then I ended up going to a bigger company called Veritas in 2001 that was quite successful and kept growing even during those dark times. But what's interesting is now being here 20 years later and reflecting back on that time when everything just seems so uncertain. And what do you do in that time of uncertainty? And how do you apply yourself and do the right things? Because there's no guidebook, there's no playbook for how we get through something like the .com crash. There's certainly no guidebook for how you get through something like the Corona crisis that's sweeping the world. And none of us have ever lived through a pandemic before. I don't know about you, but I find myself sometimes just stopping and going like, holy shit, we're living through a pandemic. It seems so surreal because in one sense, when you read the news, everything is falling apart. But then in my day-to-day life, things seems okay. I have food on the table. I've got family who's healthy and happy and so on. But it's just an odd time. It's a very uncertain time for so many of us. But then in the last 20 years, my career has taken me through lots of ups and downs. And I've worked at some companies that hopefully you recognize from this slide here. And some of them you've never heard of because they didn't make it, and that's okay too. I've learned from all of them. And sometimes actually you learn the most from doing things that didn't work out because you decide, of course, you're never gonna do that again. But I've worked at some great companies, and I feel like I've hit the inflection point of some of those companies right as they were taking off, going through their growth or hyper growth journeys even. And it's been really fun. And Salesforce, Box, LinkedIn, WeWork are all companies, I think, that have really created a movement and a playbook for how to grow and scale things obviously none of them, some of them have also certainly made many mistakes, and very publicly so, but you learn a lot from that too. And the reason I came to Matterport, my latest company, just so you know what that's all about, it's really a company that's all about how do you scan and how do you take the 3D world, the physical world around us, the built world, and scan it in a way that digitizes it so you can share with anybody in your life. You can either share it for personal reasons, you could share it for commercial reasons, you could share it for design reasons, sales reasons, and so on. But what's really interesting is I was first introduced to Matterport when I was over at WeWork. WeWork was a company, as many of you know, that has office space all around the world. And the idea was, can we use technology to virtualize the office so people could get an experience for what it's being like in that office without having to go there physically? You save people time, you save people money, you even save the environment because you don't have to travel around. So people benefit, but also, of course, WeWork benefit because they don't have to spend a lot of time giving everybody tours of their spaces, which is a very expensive proposition. And so I first learned about Matterport at WeWork, and I was really impressed with technology. And the goal was to use Matterport in all of the WeWork buildings. And we were starting to roll that out when I left at the end of last year. So I love the purpose of the vision of Matterport to digitize the physical world. They have a strong community around that, which I think is something that's always been a silver lining in my career. And I'll talk more about community marketing in just a moment. And then just the impact that you have, I think of it as, I want to work for companies that if those companies succeed, they will change the relationship that we have to each other, but also to the physical world around us. And I think that's really exciting. And so for those of you who don't know what Matterport is all about, here's, if you can see behind me, here's my beautiful wall. Here I've taken my phone and I've just scanned my space. This is what Matterport does. It allows you to basically take photos and then re-stitch together the space. It allows you to embed links and text and so on. So you can use it for personal reasons. I could share this with my friends and family. I've shared it with you right now. You could do it for e-commerce reasons if you want. Say, here's a shoppable home office. Imagine right now during Corona crisis, nobody can go in a store. You can say, well, I want to be able to actually start selling some things, so I can embed links to my store. If you're a cafe, a restaurant, a shop, you name it. And of course, you can also use it for if you want to be able to sell apartments, houses, and so on. And so we have millions of users, people who are around the world who are using Matterport to do all this, which is really great. VRBO, Airbnb, commercial real estate, and so on. So that gives you a little bit of idea of why I'm so excited. I think the possibilities of something like this is endless. Here's an art gallery in France that you can go and you can take a tour of, and you can see the photos if you want, and so on. You can get little history pieces of it. You can even buy some of the art if you want to. Again, just like so many different use cases, and it's what makes me excited to be at this company. So that gives you a little bit of a background about why I'm excited about being at this company. But I'll tell you, I started the job a month and a half ago, starting a new job in a pandemic, super weird. I haven't met a single person on the marketing team in person. We've met over Zoom. The executive team, I've met about half of them, and in person, half of them not over. I've only met them over Zoom. And then trying to do a big launch, because we just launched Matterport for iPhone 2 weeks ago, trying to do all that in a pandemic without any of us being in the same room has also been really interesting. So there's a lot of lessons learned there. But we've certainly proven that you can work this way and you can be productive and you can be efficient. I don't know if it's always fun. I wish we were sometimes in the same room, but we've certainly proved that we can do it. Finally, before we get to the marketing stuff, I also write a lot. If you want to read anything of my articles, I write a lot about marketing. I post a lot on LinkedIn. I write a lot of posts, a lot of articles around marketing, best practices, branding, community, and so on. So go read some of those. Okay, that's a little bit about me. Let's talk about marketing. Of course, that's why we're here. And that's probably what you all really care about. So the first section I want to get into here is, what is great marketing? How do I see the world of marketing? The second part of it is some lessons I've learned from some of the companies that I've been at. And then I want to open it up to some Q&A and just answer some of the questions that we got through email and through chat. Whatever, if you have any questions, put them in the chat and hopefully we can get to them at the end. So great marketing, I think, is around a couple of different things. Number one, I think it's about the story first. If you want to become a company and a brand that stands the test of time, and you don't want to become a transactional company that people just use in short term, but the moment something better comes along, they switch. You have to think about the story of why people should care. What is the purpose behind the thing that you're selling? And I'm very much at the school of start with why. Explain the why behind the reason you're in business. And that why could be at many different levels. It could be at the personal level, the family level, the work level, the business level. It could be at the society level, and it of course can be at the planetary level. But you have to figure out the story around what it is that you're doing and why you're doing it. And again, it doesn't mean that you can't be successful if you don't have the why. If you're just focused on sales, you can be very successful. I just think that, and I've seen this before, if you want to build a brand that has loyalty and longevity, you have to get people to believe in your story and your purpose. So think about your purpose, your why. Think about the values that you say that you live by, and communicate those very clearly to your employees, to your customers, to your prospects. And then of course, the most important thing, what are the actions that you're taking that supports that? The actions that support your product, the actions that support your actions, that supports the story that you're putting out there. Very important. Start with the story. Number two, I think customers come first. Customer stories are more important than anything. I think if you want to be a brand that people fall in love with and that builds a strong community, because everybody comes to me right now and says, well, we want to build a community. I even saw some of these questions. I want to build a community. Well, guess what? A community comes from aligning yourself with people who know that you're aligned to their success, where you care about their success intimately. You have to consistently show that I care more about your story than my story. I care more about your success than my success. I care more about how you're using the product than how I'm telling you to use the product. And so the customer stories matter more than anything. Finding those customer stories, elevating those customer stories, using them for many different purposes. Now, I came from Salesforce, as you saw. I think Salesforce is one of the companies that does it the very best in the world. When people are in the Salesforce tribe, in the Salesforce community, they're there for many different reasons. They know, of course, Salesforce can make their company better, more efficient, more productive. They get better insights into sales and marketing and so on. But they also use Salesforce because Salesforce takes an active interest in making sure that the individual gets highlighted. That if you're a Salesforce administrator, we care about your success. We care about your career. We care about you being the hero of the story. So if you work at Johnson & Johnson, if you work at BMW, if you work at Lego or one of these companies, and you're a Salesforce administrator, you're part of a special tribe, an elite tribe of people who's helping your company embrace the future. And it's because Salesforce constantly says, you as a Salesforce administrator, you as a Salesforce operator, your stories are really important. And then they connect the dots between those people. That's why they do a lot of events, because getting people together to share those stories is really important. And now, of course, because of coronavirus, they can't do it in person, so they do it all virtually. Every company is now starting to embrace virtual events. And I think there's a lot of positives to doing that. I don't know if it's the same as being in person, just like it's not the same as us doing a Zoom call, but it's certainly better than nothing. And so you can use the same philosophy even virtually. Number three, I think it's really important that when you think about your company and your positioning in the market, that you're able to say that you are the first or the best or the only one to do something. And each of those is a competitive moat itself. So if I ask any of you, well, tell me about your company, you have to be able to say, well, we're the first one to do this, or we're the only one that does this, or we're the best one to do this. Because if you don't, then you haven't differentiated yourself enough versus the market or the competitors out there. Now, the thing about it is, if you say you're first to something, you oftentimes appeal to people who want to be a part of a pioneer, trailblazers, early adopters, right? So you appeal to a certain group of people. If you say we're the first to do something, you don't have a lot of social proof, but you say you're the first, then you're appealing to people who want to be at the cutting edge of things. It's great. If you say you're the only one to do something, then oftentimes you're appealing to people who want to be part of a select group of people. Like exclusivity is a key word. I can only get this if I use your product. I can't get it anywhere else. And I feel like I'm part of like a special club. Only is a very powerful thing to think about as well, being the only one to do something. And if you say you're the best, Then you start going into more of a mass market adoption. But of course, the thing about saying your best is it's not credible for yourself to say it. Your customers have to say it. The influencers have to say it. The experts have to say it. You come out and saying we're the best at something. I think nowadays most consumers, most buyers are just too savvy to not believe it. They want to go get third-party validation. So saying your best is great if you have the social proof to really live up to that statement. But my point here is when you think about your positioning, when you go to your website, when you think about the materials that your sales teams send out, are you able to say one of these things about yourself? Are you the first to do something? Are you the best to do something? If not, think about how you position yourself. Again, you don't have to use those exact words, but you have to be able to really stand out from the crowd. Number 4 is, I think that most teams, whether you're a company level, you're a marketing team, think about your product, you operate at 3 different levels. There are tactical things you do, there are strategic things that you do, and there are epic things that you do. And the way I've always kind of seen the world is the tactical things are the things that you need to do to keep the lights on, answering that urgent email, updating the blog, putting up a new image on the website and so on. Important, but they're very tactical. And if you only focus on the tactical things, no company ever became great by just doing that, because it's just a lot of busy work, but not a lot of, I would say, cohesion behind that strategy. The majority of work, in my mind, should be on the strategic things. The strategic things are the things that require a full company effort or a full team effort, and really has a lot of thought that goes into it. Oftentimes takes weeks or months to plan and then execute. But it could be a big campaign. Like, we want to go and become known for the company that delivers the best collaboration on mobile devices. To convince the world of that is oftentimes at least 9 months, if not a year or 2, of really being consistent with content marketing, campaigns, events, and so on, but really having an idea that everyone rallies around. And when you do that, you get a focus that you just don't get if everybody's doing tactical work. And you see an outcome that's oftentimes 2x, 3x, 4x, because you're doing these strategic things that gets everybody together and gets people focused. So I would spend the majority of time there, but you also have to give yourself time to sometimes go for the epic things. These are not easy. They come along maybe once or twice in your career, but when they come, you have to seize them and you have to really go for them. And I always say to my team, unless we give ourselves space to also try to dream about some of these epic things, they will never happen. If it was easy or if it was obvious, everybody would do it. So the epic things are oftentimes how I would describe in 2 ways. You find an epic thing by either finding something that's so broken and you say to yourself, this is so shit, we can do this 10 times better than what's been done before, right? Or you go the other way and you say, you know what, we're going to do something that's never been done before. Those are the 2 ways. You either go for the 10x or you go for the brand new. You think about 2 examples of companies who have done this. You got an Airbnb, for example. I think Airbnb is a company that would fall in the 10x category. Beforehand, renting places from private individuals were so broken. It was so hard to do. It wasn't really a joyful experience. There was no 2-sided way of knowing what was real and what wasn't. Airbnb came and blew it out the water. But you could beforehand rent from private people. It just wasn't very easy. They made it 10 times better. The net new category is a company like Uber. Beforehand, you couldn't really do what Uber did before, because it was the magic of people's private vehicles with a mobile phone, because you had to know your location, creating a 2-sided marketplace, brand new, big risk, because there's a lot of reasons it could fail, but obviously they've created an amazing company because of that. So you could do it at the company level, you could do it at the marketing level, right? But you have to give yourself space for it. And here's the secret behind the epic thing, and strategic and tactical. If you just focus on tactical things, there's a lot of data to guide you. And we all live in a data-driven world, and we love as much data because it gives us confidence and kind of air cover to make our decisions. If you're just going for tactical things, there's a lot of data because you can constantly tweak and optimize. So if we just do this campaign on Google 10% better, 20% better, it's going to be this much better. And it's great. It's important to do that. Once you get into the strategic realm, you get a little bit more fuzzy on the data. You certainly have a lot of data probably still, but there's probably a lot of unknowns, a lot of questions that you don't have, again, because you're going into these bigger realms where okay, are we going to invest a full year of our time on this campaign? Well, what if it doesn't work? And all these questions, because you don't have a guidepost. And guess what? When it gets to the epic realm, very little data to guide you. There's maybe some, don't get me wrong, there could be some data, but it's oftentimes very little data. This is when you go with the gut feel, like, and have the courage and the determination to think about, well, what is the marketing campaign that's going to be epic for 2020, 2021 look like for us? Again, it's not easy. And if it's obvious, people have probably done it before, but that's where you have to trust in your instinct a little bit. And so I think any good marketing team, any good company, honestly, operates at this 3 levels. And I usually think of it, I want to spend 20% of my time on tactical things, 60% of my time on strategic things, and 10 to 20% of my time on the epic things, really trying to focus on. And of course, once you come up with the epic thing, then you have to turn it into a strategy, and you have to turn it into tactics, of course, because you have to figure out the work streams and the actions you have to take to get there. But it's very important. You have to give yourself space. No company that I can think of have ever gotten great just by focusing on tactical things. It's either strategic, and in the best case, epic things. The next thing is really around just keeping focus. You know, I think it's so easy to get distracted by so many things. There's so many balls to be able to chase. Whenever I've come into a new company and a new team, I always say the most important thing that we can do is focus on a few things and do a few things better than too many things. You know, and it was true of the company I just came into here. It's like they were doing actually a lot of really good work, but they were all over the place. And so trying to keep focused is really, really important. Hey, Rachel, do you mind going on mute? There you go. Thank you. So if you keeping focus is really, really key. And the way I think about it is, you know, at the end of the year, at the end of 2020, and this is what I tell my team, you know, everybody in the company and maybe outside the company is going to remember the marketing team for 1 or 2 things. They're not going to remember us for 10 things. It's just not going to happen. You can't do 10 things equally well. So what are the 1 or 2 things that we're going to do really well, that we're going to put a lot of weight behind? Again, that 20%, 60%, 20%, whatever it is. But like, yeah, of course, there's still emails that need to be answered, things that need to be handled, and all kinds of things. But what are the 1 or 2, maybe 3 things that we're going to focus on and do really well as a team? And that goes all the way from the company level to the marketing to the individual. You know, I've certainly had many times in my life and in my career where it's Friday night and I've had a really busy week. And I look back on my week and I'm like, wow, this was a crazy busy week, but I don't really know if I achieved anything because everything was just busy work, jumping on meetings, doing Zoom calls, you know, updating the blog post, you know, answering Slack messages. Like, it's so easy to feel busy and to get into tactical work. You got to keep focused. And I schedule time for focus. I schedule my team time for focus to make sure that they don't get distracted. And then finally, around branding, I think the most iconic brands, of course, they last and they stand the test of time. And I'm very passionate about storytelling and branding. And the way I think you'd have to do it is really a couple of different ways. Number one, of course, you have to have a product that is useful and that people like to use, that's valuable, and that people fall in love with. It's obvious. If you want to be the number one in Gartner and Forrester and IDC, all these experts, of course, they're not even going to consider you unless you have a product that's useful or valuable or delivers something. So that's number one. But just having a good product, we've seen throughout time, there's been so many examples of great products that didn't really go anywhere. And it's because oftentimes either they don't execute well or they don't have the community behind them. And so building a community, I think, is really important when it comes to building an iconic brand. And community building, and here's the secret to this, is it starts internally. So many, there are really 3 audiences to consider. You've got your employees, you got your customers, and you've got your prospects. And most companies that I talk to, they say, well, how do we build a community for our customers and our prospects? I think that's great, but you're missing a trick because community starts internally. It starts with your employees. It starts with having a set of employees who are willing to walk through water for you. Every company of these I've been at, Salesforce, Box, LinkedIn, WeWork, the employees were the most diehard fans. And when you have those diehard fans, guess what? They tell everybody in their network, their friends, their family, about the joy of being in a place that is actually changing the world. So focus on your employees first. It doesn't mean there's not hard conversations or hard times. We've all gone through those. but make sure that your employees understand what you're doing and understand the mission that you're on and why it's so important that you succeed in the world. And then you go for your customers, and then you go for your prospects. That's how you build a really strong community. But don't do it the other way around. Don't start with your prospects and then go customers and then employees. It rarely works. Richard Branson, he said it best. The most important audience that I have for any of my companies is my employees. And I'm a firm believer in that. Treat your employees well, but not just treating, it's not about treating them just well. It's also about getting them to believe in what you're doing and surrounding yourself with people who are really bought into that mission. Because we know when people are passionate about what they do, they unleash an energy that's so important. And finally, love or empathy or compassion, whatever you want to call this, but like communicating with authenticity with your audience and showing again over and over that we care about you and your success and so on, I think it's how the strongest communities are built. And that just takes time. You know, everybody comes and says, I want to build a community. I want to do it really quickly. There's no quick way to build a community. I've never seen it happen. And if you have, I don't know how strong those communities really are. It just takes time to build a community. Great content, great thought leadership, great care, you know, great customer stories. All of this, it all adds up to building a really, really strong community. All right, let me shift gears a little bit and tell you some of the lessons I learned from hypergrowth. And there's some overlap in what I just shared, but it's just, you know, what I've learned from some of these companies I've worked at. Number one, again, crazy ideas. There's this notion of epic ideas. And so sometimes you have to go for these big swings where you don't really know how it's going to play out. So when I was back at Box, this is, I guess, what, 8 or 9 years ago. It's quite a while ago. And we had the idea. So back then, Box was competing against Dropbox, Google Drive, and there's probably maybe 50 other companies out there where you could sign up and you can get free storage. And you could share, you could upload your files, and you can share those files with people in your network. And back then, the thing we were mostly competing on, honestly, was storage, how much storage space you got. And back then, when you signed up for an account, you'd get 1 gigabyte, maybe 2 gigabytes of free storage. And so we said, well, why don't we try to create a momentum around the company that just blows every one of our competitors out of the water? So we came up with this idea, says, hey, you will get 50 gigabytes of free storage for life if you sign up within this week, right? So there was a time-bound offer, and we said, you're gonna get unlimited amount of storage, and you can share it with your friends because they'll get the same amount of storage, and so on. But to get there was very nerve-wracking. And again, this is why my point of, it sounds simple now when you look back, but at the point in time, there's so many questions. You know, what if, can our infrastructure handle it? How expensive will it be? What if people don't sign up? What if it breaks? What is the experience on mobile? What if that doesn't happen, you know, in a delightful way? There were so many questions, so much planning went into this. But when we finally executed it, and we had the courage to do so, in 1 week, we had more than 1 million people sign up, because we also just made a lot of noise about it online. We got a lot of press excited about this. We got a lot of our influencers and people who were in the network just excited by it. But getting 1 million people, more than 1 million people to sign up for something in a week is very, very hard to do. But it was worth it because that gave us a base, because again, you know, we were trying to compete with all these companies. We were trying to go bottoms up and say, we want to get to as many users as possible, because many of these users, even if they use it for personal reasons, are of course working in a business, because the dividing line between work and life was slim. And of course now with coronavirus, it's evaporated overnight. There's no dividing line between your work and your private life anymore. It's all blurring together. And so trying to make a connection with people was really interesting. And my point is not to go and do this offer. Obviously, this is not going to work for you, but trying to think about the big things that you go for that seems very outrageous, that nobody else would dare to go for, and then put your effort behind it. So it took us many months to plan for this, scaling our infrastructure, making it redundant. It took a lot of months to plan for all the partners who we could lean on, who would promote this offer for us, thinking about the marketing plan, the PR plan, and it was a whole team effort. It really was. And that's my point, is if you're just doing tactical work, you would never have gotten to this point. So the crazy ideas are really important. Number two is the notion of relaunching something. This is something I'm a big fan of, and I really learned this the right way at Salesforce. This was back in about a decade ago. I joined Salesforce in 2007. And then in 2009, I was asked to lead marketing for a product called Chatter. And so we launched Chatter at the end of 2009 at Dreamforce. And then we said, but it wasn't actually available. It was just the announcement. It wasn't going to be available for another 9 months or so. But in order to keep the momentum, we went into this motion of relaunching every 6 to 8 weeks or so. And it was an exhausting journey, but we rallied the team around a roadmap of what that would look like. Again, being consistent for a year and a half. Because my belief is, people are so busy and they're so scatterbrained, me included, that nobody remembers anything from just hearing it once. You have to hear it over and over and over again. Repeatability is really important, especially if you want people to believe in your story. And so we went on this journey to just retell the story of Chatter throughout about a year and a half. And every time we would do one of these launches, we had a kind of a different angle, a different spin on it. But the core of it was really around talking about Chatter. That's really what it was about. But we found different reasons to do it. Suddenly we had Chatter on mobile. Then we had an ecosystem. You could build apps into Chatter and all kinds of things. And it all culminated for us. Of course, being a startup, you can't do this, but Salesforce was a little bit bigger at the time, about a few thousand people. It would culminate for us in a Super Bowl ad with the Black Eyed Peas. And even then was very risky. It's like, are we going to launch really this at the Super Bowl? This is an enterprise app. Who at the Super Bowl is going to, it's mostly consumer stuff that's being sold. I think it was the first time ever that there was an enterprise ad at the Super Bowl. But we launched it. And then within that first 24 hours, we got about 20,000 unique companies signing up. And so, it didn't give us the revenue that because we worked, this was not a paid for product. It was about giving Salesforce an edge in the CRM market, a social CRM. But it gave us suddenly access to 20,000 companies that we can go and talk to. Again, I know you can't, of course, do a Super Bowl ad, but the notion of being consistent over a period of time is something you can certainly do. And trying to think about angles around how you launch something and then consistently talk about it from different content angles or different storylines is very, very important. I think number 3, clarity is key. It comes back to my notion around focus. This here is actually an example of the diagram that Adam Newman and Mikkel McGelvey, the 2 founders of WeWork, drew up back in 2009 before they really even started WeWork. And the idea that they didn't just want to create an office company, they wanted to create a company that was around the holistic aspects of a person's life. And I think that was what they saw. They saw there were many office companies out there. They said, we can do it better. Of course, when you sign up to be a part of an office space, yeah, of course, the space is important, but it's more than that. It's the community you're part of. It's the services that become part of that. How do you do your laundry? How do you eat your food? Who do you connect with? All these different things. And I think that clarity was really key because that was the story then that they used to drive for investors. They used to drive it for employees. They used to really tell that story. And it became something bigger than just office space. And I think that's why there was so much excitement around WeWork. It's like, okay, it's not just about creating a better version of an office. It's actually about much more than that. So I think that clarity is key. And having that clarity again internally, I think is where it all starts. And then having speed over perfection. I think, there's a lot of times I think we're afraid to put things out there because we think it's not perfect enough. And this is something, so after the WeWork founders had created that diagram I just showed, they also created this to say, okay, if we want to become the holistic ecosystem for people's lives, what could that look like? So they created this kind of thing. It's kind of funny to look back on now, we bank, we sell, all kinds of things. But the idea of the company already back then, even though they started one area, we're going to be in 10 years, 20 years, we're going to be a lot more than just office space. The vision is always to be bigger than that. And so having that, but then that forces you to also have operate with a lot of speed. If you try to wait till everything is perfect, the market conditions are perfect, the team is perfect, we have the perfect funding and so on, you'll never start anything. So you just got to operate and iterate really, really quickly. But having said that, I also think, just to my final point on this, is focus also matters. I think one of the reasons why WeWork got into the trouble that they are in now, has of course been written about a lot, is because they overextended themselves. It's great having a vision. You should absolutely have a vision. What is your company going to look like in 20 years from now, in 30 years from now? Have a strong vision. Get your people fired up. Get the market fired up. Get your investors fired up. but stay focused on the core. Trying to overextend yourself too quickly just means that you're going to get into a lot of trouble. I think we work, as an example, with the school and with housing and with apartment building and so on. It's a great idea, I think, in the long term and in the macro of like integrating a holistic version of life. But at the same time, prove first that the core business model works. Prove that the core can make money and that it can scale and it can be successful. Then you start branching into other things. So while clarity is key, I think hyper-focus is equally key as well. Don't get too overextended. So for you, a startup company, you're starting out, have the clarity. Where are you going to be in 5 years, even 3 years? Excite everyone around that, and then focus on executing really well on that core. And then once you have that expanded vision, then you maybe start dabbling and experimenting in certain things, but don't get too overextended too quickly. It's an easy way to just make all your efforts too diffuse and not amount to anything. Finally, before we get to the Q&A, I wanted to share a few things that never work. Number one is being arrogant. It never works internally with your employees. It never works with your customers. It never works with the market. Trying to be a know-it-all, arrogant, having all the answers. I think especially now, in this time, in the last 2-3 months, we live in a world of hyper-authenticity. Not just authenticity, but hyper-authenticity. Coming across, as a super polished kind of company that has all the answers, I think it's not resonating well with companies. People want to deal with authentic human beings that actually have empathy for the situation at hand. So being an asshole never works. And of course, it starts internally. That's how you create a horrible culture. But if you see that also in your customer base, don't tolerate it. If you see it with your employees, don't tolerate it, because those people just have a very toxic effect on everybody else. Number two, what never works is if you just rely on data. I'm always conflicted about saying this, because then people might take it as I don't believe in data. That's not true at all. I actually believe in it. I can't do my job as a head of marketing if I don't have data. It's not possible. You have to be a data-driven marketing team. You have to be a data-driven company, to be honest. You have to know what your users are saying about your product, how they're using it, and so on. But at the same time, once you start moving into the realm of more strategic and the epic things, there's very little data. So you have to also at some time weigh how much data am I going to have and how much instinct am I going to use, and what is the balance between those two. And of course, I bet many of you wouldn't even have started your company if you just listened to the data. You had an instinct about something and you started the company. You said, I have a good feeling. I think if we execute well, we do it this way, it's going to be into a great company. But you didn't have all the answers, and you probably still don't, and that's okay. And then finally, I would say silence, meaning that I am a firm believer in over-communication. In the absence of information, when you're not saying anything, people will make up their own stories. It's been true in my entire career, whether that's your customers, your prospects, and certainly your employees. If you don't communicate, people find reasons and stories to make up in their own head about you. So if something goes wrong with your company and you don't communicate, that says a lot. Even in the best of times, you should always communicate what's happening to your customers. You don't have to overdo it, but you have many channels. You can use social channels, you can use email, you can use webinars and so on. But communication is really important to keep the notion of community alive. Certainly internally, especially at a time like this, over communicating is more important than ever. Me starting at a new job in the middle of a pandemic is something I've never done before. So I'm just trying to over communicate as much as I can with my team. Doing stand-ups much more often, not every day, but just communicating and connecting. And sometimes it's at the work level and sometimes it's at the human level, using Slack and email and Zoom and so on. But just connecting, I think, is a really important thing, because communication in my career, when I look back on my 20 years, it's always been what has either made my career at a company or it's broken it. If I haven't communicated something well, or I assumed somebody knew something, it could be customers or it could be my employees. Don't make those assumptions. I think communication is more important than ever, especially this time. So I encourage you highly to just think about how you're communicating with your team. I bet many of you haven't seen them in a long time. And so communicating with them, I think is really, really important. So my final advice is, you got to hire the right people, obviously, especially in a startup, and get out of their way. It's so funny to me in my career. I've always seen startup companies say, we want big company people. And then big companies that I've worked for will say, hey, we need startup people because they're more scrappy, they get more shit done. It doesn't really matter. Find good people who are passionate about your company, about what they do, who have aptitude. I love hiring for aptitude and smart and grit versus hiring for a resume that just looks impressive. And of course, it depends on the level of person you're hiring. If you're hiring somebody junior, absolutely go take a chance on that person if they show the right passion, energy, excitement. If you're hiring somebody very senior to be your VP of sales, of course you want to know that they've done it before, but you still have to use your right instinct and then get out of their way. Don't micromanage people. Nobody enjoys that. But hiring the right people is going to make or break your company. Absolutely 100%. And then finally, GSD, set aside time to get shit done. Put it on your calendar. Tell your team to put it on the calendar. If you want to get to the epic things and you don't want to get stuck in a tactical nightmare of building a company, building a marketing plan, focus on getting shit done. And that means setting aside time to make it happen, because it's not going to happen on its own. It's very, very important. So it's up to you, because you're the leader of your business. Make sure that it becomes a priority for everyone. Whether you're in engineering, in product, in sales, in marketing, set aside time to get that shit done. And that's how you create an epic company. And that's how you do epic marketing. All right. Thank you for listening. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see all your faces.
No, thank you. Do you want to do the questions that I sent you, or should we just do it through the chat? Maybe we should start with the questions from the people that are here.
Sure, let's do it. So I see there's some questions. There's a hello from Seattle. That's awesome. Hello, Seattle. I don't know who you are, but that's great. What's an example of an epic idea? I think I just shared one from Box. I think that was pretty epic. I think an epic idea, I mean, honestly, I feel very proud of us launching a new product 2 weeks ago, Matterport for iPhone, which was, if you'd asked me a couple of months ago, can you launch this without ever being in the same room during a pandemic? And since launching this, Matterport for iPhone, and we did it all, with virtually no money, because our budgets have been cut, like many of you are thinking about how to spend very little money. So we launched it, and in the last 2 weeks, we've seen more usage and signups on our platform than we did in the first 8 years of our company. It's just like we're seeing the momentum. And of course, we're unlocking 1 billion people. It's not that 1 billion people are going to download it, but you're unlocking the devices that people have carrying with them every day to use our technology, which is exciting. And for us, we pulled this release in. We weren't supposed to release Matterport for iPhone until the end of the year, but we said, now is the time to do it. What is our moment in time? Just like Salesforce in 2007, 2008, during that crisis, every other company was starting to slow down, laying off people, cutting budget. And Salesforce says, no, we're going to go bigger. We're going to try to grab this opportunity to grab more market share. And they did. And look at, they're one of the leading companies in the world today. And for us as well, we were thinking a lot about, well, what can we do at this moment in time to seize on the opportunity and not try to be overly salesy about it. I think people are not responding super well to hardcore sales right now. They don't want to be sold to. They want to have a story. They want to feel part of something bigger, part of a community. And so we were very mindful of that story when we came out with our product 2 weeks ago. But think about it that way. Tell a story, get people emotionally bought into what you're doing, because it's very hard to go out and just try to do hardcore sales right now. I'm sure you're probably experiencing that in your pipeline and your company. All right, cool. Let's see here. One of my biggest challenges is keeping the balance with my marketing team between performance marketing and brand marketing. How do you keep that balance? It's a great question. Another question I get a lot. I think so when I left WeWork, in November of last year, and I decided to take some time off because, as you can imagine, being at WeWork was quite an intense experience for many reasons. It was both really fun, but it was also, I've never been through a company that has been ripped in public so much as WeWork has. So that was quite intense. So I decided to take some time off, and in that time off, I probably have met with close to 100 companies, all through Sequoia and Andreessen and many of these VCs in London, in Copenhagen, and in California. And so many of the companies I met with, the CEOs would say, how do we do performance marketing really well? And the first thing I'd ask is, well, it's great to focus on performance marketing. Obviously, you want to create business, but what's your story? And then when I asked that, like, it's all over the place. Everything starts with your story. It makes no sense at all to pour so much money into performance marketing unless you figured out your positioning first, your marketing first, your story first. Where are you first and best and only? What's your unique point of view in the market? What's the content you're using? Because if you just focus on performance marketing, again, you can get results, but they're going to be junk. They're going to churn much higher. So focus on the story first and why you're special and unique and why you have a point of view. And then you focus on performance marketing. Of course, performance marketing is critical. You're not going to be successful unless you master that. You have to master SEO and SEM. You have to figure out how you scale through your paid channels. But it starts with having a great story that resonates with people. Because if you start the other way around, saying we're just going to spend a lot of money, I can guarantee you, you're going to come back to your head of marketing and say, you know, a lot of this, we're spending a lot of money and we're not seeing the results. We're seeing poor conversion. We're seeing a lot of churn and so on. So the three areas of how you get leads, you get leads from digital channels, you get leads from your, I would say, your media, and you get leads from your kind of, I would call it community channels. You get the most leads by far from your paid, for your digital channels, but the leads are also the poorest because you're buying the leads. You know, they haven't really bought into, you're buying somebody's attention. The second channel is the media channel, the organic channel, when you actually can have content marketing that people like to either repost or write about. If you get written about in TechCrunch or in BBC or you name it, it's amazing because now people are choosing to come to you. Those leads convert much higher and they're much more loyal to you because they believe in what you're doing, because they've read about you and it's self-selected. But the best leads by far is the community-based leads, when you have actually had the chance to evangelize what you do to someone at a webinar or at an event, or do something because you have spent considerable amount of time with someone, 20 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, and they understand what you're all about. Now, the thing about it is, if you look at those three channels, the community-based leads, it doesn't scale very well. It takes a long time. And it's also oftentimes more costly. It costs more money to get those leads, but the leads are much better. It's been true in every company I've been at. Those are the most expensive leads, but they're by far the ones that convert at the highest rate, and the dollar amounts are much higher because they believe in what you're doing. You've had the time. The second is that middle bucket, when you have people coming to you because they choose to come to you because they've read about you and they've heard about you from friends, family, or media. They convert much higher, but they're not as sticky as the first session. And of course, just buying leads, it looks good on paper. If you just go to your, if you just want to go for MQLs, you can buy a lot of those, but I don't know how much of the quality is always going to be there unless you have your story first. All right. You can go off mute if you want to ask a question live, or you can post it in the chat, or we can take some from the email as well, either way. Who has a question? Ori, do you have a question?
Yeah, second question. Hey, Ruben, good to see you again. When you think about your ideal marketing team, what are the different pillars you would put in that team?
It's a great question. I think there are four pillars. There are four pillars to marketing. And some of it you can outsource, and some of it you have to, I think, have in the company. So there are four pillars. Number one is product marketing, which is responsible for positioning and messaging and the story you really want to tell to the market. And sometimes when you're an early stage company, the founder is more or less doing the product marketing. It's up to you to come up with it. But you can hire somebody to help with the competitive analysis, the sales enablement, the creating of a deck, presentation, and so on. But product marketing is really important. Whether it's yourself or you hire somebody to do it, critical. Number two is performance marketing. That's the second discipline. Somebody who understands the performance landscape. If we put money into this channel, this is what we should expect. And how can we keep lowering the cost of those channels to get better leads in, of course, and better volume? And how do we create momentum that way? Really important. So you have to have an expert. They have to be an operational expert. They have to understand the digital landscape. They have to understand numbers really well. Number three is media and communications. Somebody who understands the media landscape, the content landscape, how to write really well. Again, you can outsource it, but this is one of those things I think a lot of companies make a mistake. They outsource and hire a PR agency. I would never hire a PR agency when I'm really small. And I've never done that, because more important than ever that somebody in your company believes in that message and lives it. If you hire a PR agency, if you're a small company, it's very expensive to do so. And they give you a fraction of their time. You get somebody's time maybe for a day a week. versus hiring somebody who's junior and hungry and lives it and can think about this nonstop, how to post great content on social, on different channels, how to write, how to get media attention, and so on. I would always hire. But over time, you have to scale it. And that's when you start, I think, hiring agencies to help you think of new creative angles and you scale it. But at the beginning, I would always bring that in-house. I think it's so important to have content and communications in-house. And then number 4 is around brand and creative. Somebody who is a wizard at thinking about creative ways to express your brand. What does it look like? What does it feel like? You know, what are the values that you express yourself with? You know, what do we stand for? And like up-leveling the communication around that, but really like somebody who's a wizard in design and understands the context of colors and putting together beautiful things. I think you can outsource some of that, you know, in the beginning, because a lot of, you know, founders, I certainly don't, I know what I like when I see it, but I don't have these skills to go and do it myself. So you can probably find good designers and creative people, but over time, you certainly want to bring that in-house, because you don't want to have to go to somebody external every time you want to update your online ads or your website. And so it just gets very, very expensive, but you can outsource that in the beginning. So those are the 4 disciplines. And of course, you know, you figure out which ones you in-house and which ones you outsource, but you really need all 4 of those.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I barge in with a question.
Of course.
Hi.
That's why I'm here.
Cool. My name is Demi. I'm one of the co-founders and the CTO of Penraise. We're a startup company in the world of cybersecurity. Like with developer tools, cybersecurity, noisy world, okay? Especially if you look at performance marketing, going out there, trying to spread your word and everything, because everybody are talking about like threats, hackers, blah, 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 whatever. So you need to go somehow above the barrier of noise and to be substantial with all of the things that I highly agree with you. Being, you know, like unique, trying to justify the story correctly and bringing value. I am thinking about like ways to actually leverage our marketing. In general, I agree with the PR thing totally, okay? On the context of when, even when you're big, using PR, it's for specific things. It's maybe like to highlight yourself on Gartner or whatever like that. But how can, like, what types of things you've seen in the market today that I will be able to actually multiply myself with partners, maybe like partnering up with another channel, let's say one of the big 4, Deloitte, KPMG, whatever, and writing on them. Because again, I am trying to do that. I will call myself the traveling CTO, okay? Because we're a tech company and we're trying to do it, talking to a lot of people. And I want good channels to actually spread our word, because like even when I pay for leads, it's not quality, like you said. And I so that have the problem.
So I joined a company in 2014 called Vera. It was a cybersecurity company. We were 8 people. I was employee number 8. So it was all engineers and then me. And we had no money, no budget or anything. And we had to be creative around how we thought about things. And so the first thing is you have to have a unique point of view. And I said to my team, because you're absolutely right, in cybersecurity, it's all about fear and uncertainty and hackers and malicious threats and cyber warfare and whatever else. And I said from day one, we're never going to do negative marketing. Not once. I don't want to be the company that stokes more fear in the world. I said there's enough fear already in the world. I don't want to add to it. So we're not gonna do that. It's just gonna be off the table. And the CEO agreed. He said, okay, I like that idea. So everything we put out there was much more of a positive angle. Now it's hard in cybersecurity. Don't get me wrong. I struggle with it at times. I won't lie, because a lot of it is you're trying to protect people from bad things happening. But we really focus heavily on, and it made us stand out. And the first 3 people I hired was product marketing, performance marketing, and PR. And a PR person was young and hungry, and she did a great job in the first year because, again, having somebody in-house who could help us elevate our story and what we were trying to do made all the difference. In the first year alone, we got 130 different mentions in articles. That's just gold to a small company. 130 for a small company that nobody had ever heard of was awesome. We even got Gartner and IDC to write reports about us as well. Again, you hire an external agency, somebody who works on it 20% of the time, that's not going to happen. You have to have somebody dedicated to do that, even if they're young and hungry and be able to do that. So that's number 2. And number 3, I would say thinking about creative ways to kind of partner up. So for example, we had integrations with Box. We had integrations with Dropbox. We had integration with Microsoft. And of course, we couldn't come out and say we had a partnership with them,
Mm-hmm.
but we could say we had an integration with them. So you can be kind of a little bit sneaky that way. So we would come out and put out press releases and news stories that Vera now integrates with Microsoft. If we had gone to Microsoft and said, hey, can you approve this press release or give us a
No
quote?
way in
They'd say
hell, I
no.
know.
There's no way, right? There's no way they would do that. So we just thought, well, they have an open API, they have integrations, we can integrate with anything because all these companies now you can integrate with because of their APIs. We just came out and did a lot of noise around all the integrations we had. That was free for us to do. But if we tried to ask for permission for that, it would never have happened. Right? And we didn't break any laws, but we just say, okay, if we kind of go through their PR machine, we're a small company, we're not a partner officially, right? But we are integrated. That's how we get around it. So thinking about creative ways to get around it is some of the things you can do.
Makes sense also in the keywords if you look at it in SEO, because right now you wrote a blog post mentioning Microsoft, mentioning blah, 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 whatever.
Exactly.
No, it makes sense. I know.
Exactly.
Cool. Thanks.
All right. Of course.
I think we're out of time. It's 11. So thank you so much for doing this in these crazy times.
Thank you. Well, hopefully I answered a lot of those questions that came in through my presentation. So hopefully that was good.
Yeah.
If you want to connect with me, I'm just robin@matterport.com. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, please, on Twitter, you name it. I'm happy to continue the conversation. But thank you for having me, and stay safe, all of you.
Thank
you
you
very much
so
for your time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.